Siang, top leaders of DAP, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, the slogan Janji Ditepati, I was actually asked by a few people when it was first announced by the government, and my spontaneous response at the time was, I think this is more like a BN campaign slogan. Because I think, to me, once you are in power, this Janji should not arise anymore. It would have been easier for me, and I think to a lot of people, if the government just say, these are the promises we made before we became government, and we have fulfilled all of them. Be easier, rather than to find out what promises they made and how they were fulfilled. This is, I find, difficulty. Once a government or a political party is in power, then it becomes the trustee of the people, as far as I'm concerned. In line with good governance, place private vested interest under below public interest. But in the final analysis, ladies and gentlemen, when government is, the time is due for them, it goes back to the people, and you yourself will be able to go back and make assessment of what they have done and whether it is worth continuing to support the government. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, let me make it clear that I'm not here as a pro-government or pro-opposition. I'm neither, actually. All I'm concerned is we want a good governance. People's perception may be different, but there's nothing much I can do about that one. The fact remains that I'm not a politician. I don't belong to any political party. I think it's too late for me also to become a politician. I am 4 years older than Yang Berhormat Lim Siang. I am 1/4 century older than Malaysia. Still young. So if today the government was a PR government, I'll be exactly saying the same thing. Dato' Chong Eng Leong is here, but you cannot talk about Sabah and don't talk about the mother of all problems, that is the illegal. So I will be as short as possible on this one, because Dato' Chong Eng Leong is here, and I think all of us are familiar because we are living with the problem. This is a national problem, but the Malaysian living in Sabah actually shouldering the problem. Suffice it for me to mention, I think in passing, by my estimation, the illegals or the foreigners have already outnumbered Malaysians of Sabah origin. We can now call Sabah Darul PTI. To the best of my recollection, this began way back in the late 60s, early 70s. Some 42 years ago, despite the government pledges, and this is where pledges important, to resolve it, and this has always been used by government leaders, resolve the issue once and for all. However, you can see today the problem instead has grown bigger and more complicated. And to show the people that the government is doing something about it, yes, I admit various actions have been taken, including the establishment of a federal task force about 23, 24 years ago. I was still in the civil service. the building of temporarily, it says temporarily detention centers. But if you look at over the years, it's temporarily on a permanent basis. You know? Because they were temporarily, but it's not temporarily. It's always full. Then you have deportation. You have certain operasi this, operasi that. And the latest is the RCI. And I agree with Yang Berhormat Lim Kit Siang. So far, normally, when you have an RCI, the first meeting is important. And then they will then inform the public what they're going to do. But so far, things seem to be very quiet. So your guess is as good as mine. And RCI is the latest action that's supposed to resolve the problem. But so far, ladies and gentlemen, so far, not one of these so-called action has produced the desired result. Now, Daily Express, dated Friday, 11 August 2006, the Chief Minister, Sabah, was quoted as saying that the government would rid Pulau Gaya of illegal immigrants, this is the one, once and for all. And all their homes will be demolished. Now it is 2012. If you see Pulau Gaya, you go there, nothing has changed. I think it's more PTI. So, to make it short, why none of this action has ever produced the desired result? Why? To me, because number one is lack of political will. Number two, this is, I think, a government agenda for Sabah. Number three, the government is the problem and not the solution. At least the present government. So I leave PTI now. Next important issue affecting Sabah, this has always been talked about. We don't talk about it unless we feel the problem. But the problem is very badly affecting you and I, poverty. Just before 12th general election in March 2008, I heard, including Prime Minister himself at the time, and read statements of government leaders claiming that by 2010, that is 2 years before 2010, they said this abject poverty will be a thing of the past. By 2010, poverty will be completely eradicated. So it occurs to me, see, here is a government which has not eradicated poverty for, at the time, 46, 47 years, and could do it within 2 years. How to believe? Again, now it is 2012. And the poverty situation has not improved. Instead, it has become worse. This is not what I say, ladies and gentlemen. In 2010, UNDP, United Nations Development Program officials, and the World Bank said Sabah is the poorest state in the country. And I was also told by a very senior UNDP officials in Kuala Lumpur that 50% of the total number of poor people in the country are actually in Sabah. To me, this is the bottom line. Irrespective of how rosy the government trying to portray that life in Sabah is good, excellent, and etc., etc., and to try and downplay the poverty situation, I think it is now impossible to hide, because if you go, especially to the rural areas, poverty is everywhere to be seen. Sabah, I remember at one time, and I think why Jimmy Wong mentioned it earlier in his speech, that Sabah at one time second in terms of richness, second only to Selangor. I think this is between mid-76 to around about 85. It was actually bursting with energy. Sabah was bursting with energy. The government tends to downplay the seriousness of this poverty now. It portrays that, oh, poverty will be a thing of the past soon. And in some cases, denying the existence altogether. However, in my view, poverty, as I said earlier, becoming impossible not to recognize and impossible to deny its existence. But what is surprising, ladies and gentlemen, is that poverty happens in a state where we should not be poor. You know, the state itself is rich in natural resources, including oil and gas, attractive geographical features, island, beaches, Sipaun Island and things like that. I remember reading a UN report which suggested that it says Sabah is chasing its tail in resolving poverty. Dia kata itu macam anjing lah, dia bubut dia punya ekor. Jadi pusing, tidak juga dapat ekor dia. Jadi, compared to Peninsular Malaysia, infrastructure development in Sabah, roads, water, electricity supply, way behind. And I know this because I travel to Peninsula quite often. Here, potholes on the road, very common sight. Power cuts, routine occurrences. I happened to sit next to Tan Sri Leo Mogi last night, and I mentioned to him, "You are still the chairman of Tenaga. What are you doing about this?" I said, "The power failure comes at odd times," I said. "Just the moment you need it most, and it disappeared." So he just smiled at me. Many, not only no power failure, but a lot in the rural areas, I think, still without water supply, pipe water supply, still without electricity supply. And you can say the same thing for healthcare, educational facilities and things like that. From my own reading, poverty rate exceeds 30% in Sabah, and children poverty rate is in excess of 42%. And that has been said by YB Lim, the gap between the poor and the rich getting wider and wider, and the poor getting poorer, and the rich getting richer. Okay, let me turn to, I'm looking at my time, I don't want to steal a lot of this opportunity from other people, because I'm sure you have a lot of things to say. Okay, corruption. The Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2009 became operational on the 1st of January 2009. I think the idea, the pledge was to minimize the incidence of, or if not eliminate, corruption altogether. Unfortunately, in reality, this is another unachieved pledge. According to Transparency International Malaysia, as at December 2011, Malaysia, for the third consecutive year, which means 1 year after another, no break, recorded a decline in the CPI, Corruption Perception Index, score. 2011 score was 4.3, and then 2010 score higher than the 2011, 4.4, which is much lower than the target of the government. Government target was 4.9. Now the CPI, the maximum score you can get is 10. 10 does mean no corruption at all, you are perfect. In 2011, New Zealand scored the highest with 9.5, followed by Denmark and Finland with a score of 9.4. Then comes our neighbor Singapore with 9.3. Compare that with us, 4.3. Not even 50% of Singapore's. Corruption instead became all-pervasive, contagious, and costly. It's very costly. You know, like giving just big project to one particular contractor. They call it negotiated tender. To me, it is a one-horse race. Itu kuda berlari juga, tidak berlari pun menang. So, that means the real value of the ringgit. What I like to say, kalau kerajaan gunakan RM1 atau belanjakan RM1, kita mau nilai itu direalisasikan. Berarti RM1 dibelanjakan, RM1 nilainya juga. $1 spent, we get the value of $1. Through negotiated contract, in my view, maybe you spend $1, but you only get the value maybe 40 cents. You know? So, then next, under Article 160, Federal Constitution, Merdeka Day refers to 31st August 1957. And the Federation of Malaysia means the Federation of Malaya Agreement 57. My understanding of historical facts is that Malaya gained independence from the British on 31st August 57, 6 years before the formation of Malaysia. North Borneo, at the time lah kita punya nama North Borneo, gained independence from the British also on the 31st of August, but not 57 but 63. And Sarawak in 63 but 22nd of July in 63. So to me, historical facts indicate that Malaya, Sabah, Sarawak gained independence on 3 separate and different dates. How can we be all celebrating 55 years of independence on 31st August 2012? My arithmetic is not very good, but not that good, not that bad also. So, to me, why don't the government be very truthful? Just say, the country means Malaysia, celebrating Malaya's 55th year of independence. Why not? It's just the truth. Then, how can the Federation of Malaysia, it means the Federation of Malaya 1957 agreement? This is something very hard for me to understand. And what you cannot understand, very hard to accept. So, my question is, does Malaysia exist as what our forefathers, founding fathers, envisaged? This appears to me a distortion of historical facts. By whom? By the people in power. To me, this is worse than promises fulfilled, unfulfilled rather. If the government is really sincere in promoting and creating genuine national unity, it should give prominence to 16 September. 16 September. Because 16 September applies to all this region. But you remember, 16 September, it took the government how many years? 46 years in 2009. Baru dia kata, inilah tarik penubuhan Malaysia. 46 years. Now on this one, I caught my attention. This is yesterday's paper, Sunday, 2nd September. Liu, ... government recognizes 16 September as Malaysia Day. Dia kata the government recognize this and it is a national holiday. What I like to ask him is just the question I just asked just now. What is the reason for waiting for 46 years to recognize and accept this date, which is it's a historical fact. Then he also said, why we move forward, he said. What about America? He said 4th of July 1776 was the Independence Day of United States of America. And then all the 49 states joined at different times. You know, some 50 years later, some more than 50 years later. And they're still, Independence Day is still on the 4th of July. To me, ladies and gentlemen, this is not comparing apple for apple. Apple sini, according to YB, pisang sini. So, macam cannot compare. You must remember, 4th of July 1776, US was US. Okay? Today, 236 years later, US is still US. You know? Whereas, in the case of Malaysia, Malaya, 31st August 57, come 16 September 63, Malaya as a region, together with Sabah, Sarawak, Singapore, form a new country altogether. So you cannot compare US with Malaysia. So, in my view, ladies and gentlemen, genuine unity cannot be achieved through distortion of historical facts. Especially now, I think people are more learned, they are more literate, they have access to internet, very hard to fool them now. And then, the more the government try to present facts not in a truthful manner, the more people are curious to find out what is the truth. Okay, let me just again, to the best of my recollection, Malaysia was supposed to be a federation of equal partners. At least that is what I remember, that is what I have read. And then we have a lot of documents to support all this. Equal partners on a regional basis, no? Namely, Malaya, Singapore, Sabah, dan Sarawak. Now Sabah has been reduced to just one of the 13 states of Malaysia. Singapore was expelled from Federation in 65. Now the question comes to mind. Has Parliament, I don't know, has Parliament the power and the authority to expel Singapore just like that? Have the Sarawak and Sabah government been officially consulted? I knew it was debated in Parliament. What has this development got any impact on the Malaysia Agreement itself? Some people argue that because Singapore was expelled, the Malaysia Agreement could be null and void or abrogated. Now, then there are other relevant documents, for example, 20-point safeguards, Proclamation of Malaysia, Kabul Commission Report, Intergovernmental Committee 1962 Report, Malaysia Solidarity Consultative Committee, Deliberation, etc., etc. All these documents related to the formation of Malaysia appear to have been ignored or regarded as what I call inconvenient truths. And for the younger generation, best forgotten. One of the arguments supporting the formation of Malaysia was that security, and I think this was touched earlier, especially in terms of Indonesia and the Philippines. What security we have when we have already been inundated by the RTI? Apa ini? PTI, okay. Sekejap lagi. 2 minit. So, Brunei with opted out, they feel they are secure, I think. They got no complaints. And Singapore, which was expelled, far better than us. So, let me change, been given a notice. In short, I go in short. To Sabahans, Malaysia is characterized by unfulfilled and broken promises, distortion of historical facts by the people in power, a government very long on eye-catching slogans, but very short on delivery. There is no shortage of thunder and lightning, but the rain doesn't appear to come. Thank you very much.